Shimon's CV is giddying and also interesting, but I find it hard to abbreviate. But in brief, having been born in this country, he has both lived and worked in Israel since the 1980s. But since 2017, he's been professor of practice in archaeology and history, of practice in archaeology and of history at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. He's conducted very many excavation projects and field surveys, some of which I myself and many others have had the pleasure of visiting and being shown around in different parts of Israel and Palestine and the Middle East. His interests are very wide when he digs, ranging from landscape archaeology to the history and archaeology of Jerusalem, to the history of archaeology itself, to early Christianity, on which he's written notably, to the history of photography in the Middle East. And Shimon and I have to say this, go back a very long way, when we co-directed a project to rescue and conserve the PF's collection of historic photographs. And Shimon's published a lovely book, at least one book based on those photographs. We even, among Shimon's more than 150 research articles, is one which we co-authored on Flinder Petrie's use of photography at Tel El Hessi. Not many people read it nowadays, I imagine, but I look back to that collaboration with pleasure. So he's also, Shimon has written widely. He has served as editor-in-chief of Strata, as we mentioned, and he has co-edited the Archaeological Encyclopedia of the Holy Land and the Illustrated Dictionary and Concordance of the Bible in years past. A number of other books, and he has had a wide presence. Some of you will have seen him on television documentaries, produced for National Geographic, Smithsonian, and all sorts of other Discovery, all sorts of other very high class channels. He'll be speaking then, quite simply, on recent archaeological discoveries on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. As you'll have seen if you read the summary of the lecture, excavations have been conducted there since 2006, but I think he'll be updating us on some of the very latest discoveries. So over to you, Shimon.
Thank you very much, Tessa, for that introduction. My thanks also to Anthony and to Sheila for helping with the organization of this event. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to now transfer to share the screen with my PowerPoint. So bear with me a second, please.
Very good. Excellent.
Okay, so I hope you can all see the screen. And so again, welcome. It's great to be here. I'm here in North Carolina in Charlotte, and it's just gone 11 o'clock in the morning. So I'm in the past, but I'm always in the past, and that's been part of my interest as I've gone along in all the different sort of projects that I've dealt with. So we're going to be talking today about recent archaeological discoveries on Mount Zion in Jerusalem, and we've been digging for about a decade or so. And I say that because we did begin in 2000, and we did some sort of preliminary cleaning and some operations of one sort or another, and Nick Slope participated in that work as well. But really, the work essentially got underway in 2006. The picture that you see in front of you is of the old city of Jerusalem. It's a very special city. It's a city that is dedicated to Jewish and Christian and and Muslim beliefs. So you can see here on the far right, the Dome of the Rock, place where Muhammad ascended into the heavens, according to the Muslim belief. In the center left, you can see the complex of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So that's a place relating to the crucifixion and burial of Jesus. And then in between, also to the right, but beneath the level of the Dome of the Rock, you can see the Western Wall. And then right in the foreground, you can see the dome of the Hova synagogue in the Jewish quarter. There's a very special view, which was made by one of my students in a previous institution, Joel Kramer, and I thank him for that because it is a very special picture. I want to dedicate this lecture to the memory of Nick Slope, Dr. Nicholas Slope. He was a keen supporter of the activities of the Israel Antiquities Authority over many years and served as its honorary secretary, as you all know. And he was also a key staff member on the Mount Zion excavations. In 2000, as I mentioned, during that initial sort of season, and later in 2016, and you can see him on the left here, exploring the interior of one of the water systems that have been excavated prior to our getting there by Magen Brashi, and we found a whole heap of Coca-Cola bottles at the bottom, as you can see in front of him there. And anyway, here you can see Memoirs from the Holy Land, which was published in 2019, which also has quite a few stories about his experiences at different archaeological sites, including Mount Zion. And we all miss his wit and knowledge. I do want to say a few things about our purpose here, and it's important that we clarify this because I'm sure this is something that might come up in the question and answer sort of session, and it's best that we deal with it here straight away. And this expedition abides by international law. It abides by UNESCO's policy on the protection of cultural heritage and ASOR's, that's the American School of Oriental Research's policy on professional conduct, that scholars and their work should at all times protect archaeological heritage. We remain neutral on all political issues. We've got to take into account that we're the only international university digging in Jerusalem. We have an inclusive outreach program linking into people in the vicinity, whether they're Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. Our purpose is to benefit the city economically. We don't want to disadvantage anyone in the process. We don't want to impinge on land rights and territorial claims. Luckily for us, and there's a reason why we're digging at this specific spot, this was declared as a part of the green belt, which surrounded the whole city during the British Mandate at the time of the engineer Ashby's work, and that became then common land, and it also remained not only common land, but also was part of the no man's land in the area of the armistice line all the way up to 1967. So that is to have some sort of clarification there, because excavations in Jerusalem are usually sort of embroiled in all sorts of political sort of matters, and questions of this kind tend to come up. So I want to make our situation very, very clear from the outset. So now we can get into the archaeology itself. Magen Brashi undertook work at the site originally. That's why we came in to complete and enlarge upon his excavations. On the left, you can see a topographical map of the city, which shows where we are in terms of the underlying hills beneath the city. Many of some of those sort of internal valleys and gullies, of course, have been filled in and not visible. So it's important to see that we are on the slope, which extends down from the summits. And I say summits in plural because there are a number of summits on Mount Zion, and this is sort of in between the northern and southern summit of Mount Zion. We are on the eastern slope. You wouldn't think so from looking at that photograph in the center. The excavation itself was undertaken by Megan Bloshi originally in 1974 because the Jerusalem municipality wanted to open up a new gate into the southern Old City Wall. The idea was that the area that you see behind the wall, which is now a car park, there will be an underground car park there and all sorts of buildings of one sort or another. This plan, luckily, and I'm very happy, was abandoned. The engineers at the time should have had some sort of common sense, and that is, if you're going to dig inside an ancient city, it's not surprising if you come across some archaeological remains, and that's exactly what Megan Bloshi did come across. Here you can see a portrait of Megan, and on the left you can see our map of the site, indicating in red, that bold red, the walls and the architectural features that were evident at the time of his work. On the right, you can see a map showing most of Mount Zion, which includes the Armenian quarter of today and the area of the Citadel, which is a northern edge of Mount Zion, or the Western Hill, with all of the excavations were conducted by Megan Bloshi in Armenian Garden, along the city walls, in the area of Christchurch, Zion Gate, and Caiaphas House. Indeed, I'm just now working on an article on some very interesting stone vessels, including representation of fish on a stone vessel from the 1st century CE. So these are lots of excavations, and we've been entrusted as part of this overall project with the publication of his archaeological excavations as well. And this is what he found when he got down to the base of the city wall. He came across a tower which is jutting out from the base of the Turkish Ottoman city wall, which dates from the 1540s, but below it is a medieval tower. You can see that in the upper right-hand picture. At the bottom right-hand, you can see a photograph which was taken in November 1975, and it was taken by a young boy by the name of Shimon Gibson. This is my picture, which I took. It's the only excavation photograph of the site in its totality. So it's quite important for our subsequent excavations. I was a teenager at the time, and again asked me to come along and train at the site and also to take the surveying. So I did the mapping of the site. On the left, you can see that at the base of the tower, so I don't know if you can see I can't actually indicate there, but in the lower right-hand corner, you can see of the right-hand side of the lower right-hand corner picture, you can see a pile of stones, and within that pile of stones, which was the rubble, which is from that tower, which is seen above, this inscription was found. It was found broken in 3 fragments, and it has been restored. As you can see at the top. It is now exhibited at the Israel Museum. So, what was this tower? There have been various discussions. Nachman Avigad, who excavated in the Jewish quarter, the inner side of this tower, thought that this might be a gate tower. That this was not a gate tower, as was suggested by Megan Bloshi. He thought that the Cardo Maximus, which is this main Byzantine street, but was also a street that was rebuilt and reused in Crusader and later periods, extended all the way to this tower at the southern wall, but that's where it ended. Megan Bloshi, however, you can see here above, believed that this was a gate tower, and you can see the reconstruction, which was proffered by Scott Elder, who was the architect of the expedition. So,
Shimon, you're muted. Loss of sound.
Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Can other people?
Yes, it's back now.
Okay.
Right. Good.
I apologize. Apparently there was there's some message that came up. Maybe there was a little hitch. Anyway, I'll repeat what I said, and that is that having completed those excavations in the beginning of the 1980s, Megembwashi decided not to continue with these excavation works simply because the plan to create a gate in the city wall was abandoned. However, this excavation was left as a hole in the ground, as you can see at the top left picture, and there was certain dangers. As you can see, any kid walking along that path could simply fall into one of those sort of pits. And although we had no responsibility over the site, we decided to undertake cleaning and then fencing around the site to protect the site and also to protect people so they wouldn't sort of fall in. We then decided to undertake excavations, and these began in 2006. As you can see an aerial sort of view of the excavation at an earlier sort of stage, and this project is directed by myself, James Tabor of UNC Charlotte, and with our field director, Dr. Rafi Lewis, seen here in the lower picture on the left. Okay, so this shows you basically the archaeological sort of situation of our excavation, shown as this kind of irregular kind of rectangle. The star indicates a conglomerate of different buildings of one sort or another, which includes the tomb of King David, the traditional tomb of King David, and the cenacle, the room of the room of the Last Supper, and other buildings as well. This is where the Byzantine church of Hagia Sion was situated as well. And the fortifications would have run around this area. So although it's outside the old city walls of today, actually we are digging inside the ancient city that existed all the way up to the Byzantine period and actually up to the Fatimid period, as we'll see later. You can see our excavations in progress with measurements, recording. Dr. Rebecca Welton is here in the yellow t-shirt is monitoring excavations. She's the director of this part of the excavation. The excavations have changed, and we sort of take similar shots of the excavation every season, and as you can see, everything sort of develops, and it's become quite an important site visually in terms of those sort of passing by tourists to reach Mount Zion and those who go down to the Dung Gate area to gain access to go to the Western Wall. Now I'd like to sort of say a few things about some sort of to talk about a little bit about the earlier remains here, and then go sort of chronologically through some of the periods. So starting with the Iron Age, as you can see here on the right, there's a handle of a store jar, and those who can read the ancient Hebrew will be able to see it says there "Le Melech," to the king, and then you have the double-winged scarab representation. Unfortunately, the name of the city would have been in the part which has been broken off, Murphy's Law. So we can't sort of indicate the name of the city, but it is an important find there. On the left, you can see part of the remains that have been uncovered dating back to the Iron Age, which we reached last season, and in the season of 2021, COVID permitting, we'll be resuming the excavations and unearthing much more of the Iron Age. However, as you can see from these photographs, we found some amazing finds there already, including evidence of the siege of Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BCE. And you can see iron and bronze Scythian type arrowheads, which came from that layer, together with some amazing a piece of jewelry consisting of a kind of golden bell with a cluster of silver grapes below, which comes from that destruction level of 586. In terms of that piece of jewelry, you can see the drawing, which is on the right, as we constructed it. But there are examples, parallels, I believe, from that period. These are ivories from Aslan Tash, and you can see encircled in red those elements which we believe to be very similar to the piece of jewelry that I've just purchased. Moving ahead in time, of course, this part of the city was part of the area of the expanded Hasmonean city once the Accra had been removed, which was situated in the vicinity of the southern part of the Temple Mount of today. You can see a nice sort of representation of David Roberts of the destruction of Jerusalem in the year 70. But I'm talking about the period of about 140 BC, when you have Simon and Jonathan, according to Josephus Flavius, who repair the first wall of Jerusalem, and they incorporate the area where we're digging into the city. And on the top right, you can see a cluster of coins dating from the time of the first revolt, and other finds as well. The area that we were digging was impacted, to use an American sort of term, by a major construction event which was taking place in the city from after, excuse me, from after the arrival of Herod the Great in Jerusalem in 37 BC. He began two major building operations. One, of course, is the temple, and the other was his palace, which he began building in around 25 BC, BCE. And you can see here in these three illustrations, the map at the top left shows the position of the praetorium, which is on the left side or the west side of the city. And you can see it was quite large. There's a reconstruction here, which I've done with my colleagues, which is based on the description provided by Josephus Flavius and the different component parts. And at the bottom, you can see the area just behind the wall, the Armenian garden of today, where the Herod's palace was situated, and the arrow indicates where our dig is. So you can see it's in close proximity to the palace. So any building events that were connected to palace would have had an impact on digging. So this is now a view which shows those parts that we can sort of work out from the area of the citadel on the north, and then the palace buildings, the gardens, according to the detailed description provided by Josephus, and then the area which is still unexcavated of the barracks. The wall itself ran along the line of the Ottoman city wall of today. There was a gate there, and there's also a drainage system called, which is referred to as Betzel by Josephus. This, of course, not the subject of the lecture today, but I just wanted to indicate that it impacted on our area, and we can see major construction activities taking place at the time of Herod the Great. So we're talking about somewhere in 25 or perhaps slightly earlier in our area, with construction of a very, very large building complex, which included many rooms, many subterranean cellars, and ritual bathing pools, and so on. Like you can see Dr. Steve Patterson. He's from engineering on our campus, and he's in charge of precision recording. And so he's responsible for this wonderful map that you see here on the left, which shows the remains that we've been uncovering chronologically, so the different color represents the different periods. And here you can see one of the mikvahs, the Jewish ritual bathing pools, which are which have steps leading down, vaulted ceilings, very well preserved. And this was quite a surprise. We found that many of the subterranean structures had their ceilings intact. For instance, this unit here, which was a kind of bathroom with a bath on the left. And I can tell you, I clambered into that bath, and it's just right for my size. On the right, you can see next to a measuring stick, a kind of sort of semicircular bench, which people could sort of sit on when they were taking off their clothes or putting on their clothes when they were dealing with their ablutions within this chamber. The ceiling also was very well preserved. Elsewhere, we came across the evidence of a bakery within this building complex, represented by these circular ovens, and a whole array of different finds. You can see this gold coin of Nero, which was identified by Professor David Jacobson, who's in charge of examining and publishing coins from the earlier periods at the site. On the right, you can see a very interesting and very large basin or lamp, which comes from the area where Rebecca is the area supervisor. One very exciting discovery was that of a stone vessel, which has a 10-line inscription in the facets, which were cut into the sides. Now, this is a stone vessel which we know of from many other sites in terms of its morphology. It's not something new. It is, in my opinion, associated with the netilat yadayim, the hand-washing sort of procedure that people at that time undertook prior to eating, or certain sort of rituals which took place within the domestic households of the city of Jerusalem. However, this one has an inscription on it, a 10-line inscription, which you can just read. And I've on the right you can see the drawing, but on the left you can see, lower left you can see just a few of the facets, very carefully inscribed. And you could just make out Shavti lebeit Yah. So I have returned, or I've gone up to the house of God, which is quite exciting. One possibility, which we're sort of entertaining at the moment, trying to sort of work it all out, is it may have been connected somehow to the Simchat Beit HaShavah nighttime festival, which took place on the first day of Sukkot. Perhaps it was used to transfer water from the Siloam pool up to the Temple Mount. We don't know. Another thing which is quite interesting is that quite a few of the signs that you see there are akin to cryptic symbols that we know from the Dead Sea Scrolls. So for the first time, we have a link, epigraphic link, between this find here in Jerusalem and the Dead Sea Scrolls. So these are known as the esoteric writings, which Milik was the first one to work on back in the 1950s after the discovery of scrolls. Moving ahead in time, after the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans and Titus in the year 70, the area where we're digging was left as a pile of ruins. And as you can see, the 10th Roman Legion was set up, the camp of the 10th Legion was set up in the area to the north of where we're digging. Based on all the different evidences, I think we can reconstruct the size and position of the camp, which is quite interesting. A lot of roof tiles have been found, many of them stamped LEG, X, and FR. That's for the 10th Roman Legion Fretensis. They came from Sicily, as you know, originally in Messina. In any case, this camp has a strong sort of presence in this area. Hence, building operations didn't sort of start immediately. However, we do have evidence of some late Roman materials, and we're also looking at other materials found nearby. From the early Byzantine period, we have some interesting finds. This on the right, you can see this lion's head bronze handle, which is probably for an incense shovel. The one on the left doesn't come from our excavations, it's from a private collection, but it shows a similar kind of machta, which is an incense shovel. And if you look very carefully at the handle, you can see it's in the shape of a lion's head. So it's very similar to the one that we found at our site. Other finds include all sorts of finds of one sort or another. We're still sorting through the materials. I mean, I have to say this is one of the richest sites that I've ever excavated. Every day we get at least sort of 20 bags of finds which come up, and any number of small finds and great numbers of coins, which of course creates somewhat of a sort of difficulty when it comes to post-excavation. However, here you can see just a few of the finds from the Byzantine period, including this docket. It's an ostracon, a piece of pottery with a Greek inscription on it, which refers to 3 wine jars which have been delivered, and presumably somebody signed for it. On the left, you can see Sheila Bishop. She's from the Foundation for Archaeology, digging away down in part of the one of these structures where part of the arch which supported the ceiling is still extant. So when we're looking at Byzantine Jerusalem, of course, we all know about the Madaba map, the very famous map of Jerusalem, and it shows the walls of Jerusalem, the principal buildings. In the center, you can see the center bottom, you can see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And on the left, you can see Damascus Gate, so north is towards the left. And our dig site is at the southern end of the main columned street of that time, the Cardo Maximus. And we found a street. It had been assumed, if I go backwards, you can see, been assumed that the Cardo Maximus ended in a gate. You can see a kind of representation of a kind of black doorway there, and that was it. And then you just had a cluster of buildings. Well, we came across the part of the street which extended through our area. It was badly preserved, but it is definitely there. And it indicates that although the Cardo Maximus with the columns on both sides and the fantastic shops that were excavated by Professor Nachman Avigat in the Jewish Quarter do not extend into our area, we have a street which is a quarter of the width of the Cardo Maximus. It was a small, narrow street which led from the Cardo Maximus, probably from that gate shown in that representation of Madaba, which dates to the mid-6th century, and then extends all the way around Mount Zion. And here you can see our map of the site. The dotted red line indicates where the Byzantine street extended from north to south. And the person who was probably responsible for all of this with the construction of this upper level of buildings at our site, including the street, was Justinian in the mid-6th century. To the north, a major building operation was being undertaken. You can see that represented here by these stars. You see this, the star shows our excavation sites actually. Next to the stars, the star on the left, you see there's a large building. This is the Ner Church, which was built by Justinian. And it also affected the topography of the area. And it meant that our early Byzantine structures of the site were then buried, and the whole area was elevated, and new buildings were built. And of course, the street that I mentioned before. And here you can see here on the left is John Hutchings. Here we decided we're going to take away some of the paving stones of the street to see what material we could find sealed beneath it so that we could extract some dating evidence. Melanie Sammet is here in the center showing where we're putting back our time capsule. We put on Hello from 2019, that was our last season, and we all signed it, and we put it back into the ground, and then we sort of in a plastic bag and with some modern coins, and then we replace the paving stone. So who knows, somebody might dig it up in 100 years from now, and they'll have a pleasant surprise. in terms of the Byzantine streets of Jerusalem, we know quite a lot. Further up the slope, not very far from where we're digging, was a major street, which is also shown on the Madaba map, parallel to the Cardo Maximus, and it probably ran all the way through the original Roman camp, along the same line of the main street that ran from north to south within the 10th Roman Legion camp, but then it was replaced by the Byzantine street later, and it extended all the way from the western side of the Church of Holy Sepulchre on a direct line all the way to Mount Zion and to Hagia Sion, the large Byzantine church, which was erected there. And this street is also been worked on. You can see the extension of that same street in the Christian quarter of today. So this is a kind of reconstruction I've put on here. The position of our excavation, you can see here on the right, indicated by this blue star. I've indicated here Hagia Sion, that church, the main church there, which existed already from the 5th century. The Ner church, that's just between the eastern and the main Cardos, which was built by Justinian mid-6th century. So here you can see the three parallel streets which existed at this time. As I mentioned a moment ago, we can trace that street from Roshi's excavations just in front of Hagia Sion, on the north side of it, extending all the way north through Christian Street of today. So you have a very unusual sort of situation here. Jerusalem had three main streets which ran from north to south. The eastern Cardo Maximus, which ran from the area of the present-day Damascus Gate all the way down to the area of the western wall of today, and where Dung Gate is, and then the central, the most important column street, which is the main Cardo Maximus, running from Damascus Gate towards the south, and then the one that we're now. Somebody needs to mute their if somebody has unmuted themselves, could they please mute themselves? Okay, and then another.
I could mute all, but then you would have to unmute yourself, Shimon, I think.
Okay.
Should I mute all?
Can you hear me?
No, I've unmuted now. If I mute everyone, would you unmute yourself, Shimon? Ah.
Okay. Can you all hear me now?
I can.
Can everybody, if somebody can wave, then I can see. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'll continue as if everybody can hear. So we're talking about.
Can hear you. Right.
We're talking about the Madaba map and the position of our excavations and the finds which come out of it. So anyway, so that's the theoretical sort of side of things and relating to that. Now, let's just jump ahead from the Byzantine period all the way through to the time of the Crusaders, because we have some very exciting sort of finds from that period as well. Now, many of you know about the conquest of Jerusalem in 1099, so I'm not going to go into great detail. We don't have the time. But the map on the left should clarify exactly what's going on here. You had the main body of soldiers led by Tancred and others on the north, attacking the city, the fortifications, wanting to break into the city. However, there was another group led by Raymond of Toulouse, who attacked from the south. And this is not much has been known about exactly what happened during that sort of So you can see here that the siege machines and the way they sort of moved all the way to the northeast corner. That's where they broke through and into the city. So what happens is that you have Raymond, who sort of then moves to the south, and he then he attacks from the southern wall, presumably in the area of Mount Zion, and then everything sort of goes doesn't go exactly as planned, but then news arrives on the 15th of July that in fact a breakthrough had been made, and the Crusaders were able to penetrate the city from the north. Okay, so there you have it. You've got the siege machine taking place and the battle in the area where we've been excavating. So all of that is very sort of theoretical. I mean, it's based on very good historical evidence, but not hardly any archaeological finds have been found. So here you can see our chronicle that says that in the southern sector, the siege tower is led up to close to the wall, but there's a problem. There's a ditch that had been excavated by the Fatimids in front of their wall, and the only way that they could sort of attack the city was by filling it up. So a coin was offered to each soldier to bring 3 stones each, and they could sort of fill up that ditch. The question is, where was that ditch? Here you can see this is a wonderful Fatimid representation of an attack taking place on a city, and who knows? I mean, it's usually sort of attributed as an attack on Ashkelon, but that's not. There's no clear evidence. Sometimes digging around in old excavations can produce some evidence. In fact, back in the time in the 1970s, when Maghem Broshy was excavating in the area, he conducted these trial pits along the southern city wall, close to the southwestern corner. In fact, I have to say, I was asked to be the area supervisor. For a youngster, teenager, it was an amazing sort of responsibility. And we came across features that resembled a moat, but we weren't quite sort of certain at the time. You can see a close-up, you can see a photograph, and on the right you can see indicated there in yellow the line of some kind of ditch. Okay, so that's the area of the ditch that had been assumed to be the ditch. And on the left, you can see that even in terms of the topography of the southern part of the Armenian Garden today, you get this kind of ditch-like appearance. And so this was deemed to be a possibility, but no proof had been forthcoming. That all changed when we began excavating in our area, and we did find the ditch. Now, it's difficult. This is not a moat. It doesn't have a counterscarp. It's not, one of these wonderful sort of moats that exist on castles of that period. This is simply a trench which is dug in the ground in front of the fortification wall, and it's to impede soldiers from gaining access to the fortifications, so they can put up their ladders, or they could bring wooden siege machines up close to the city wall. If there's a ditch there, then of course that will be an impossibility. Anyway, we found quite a few finds, as you can see here, within this ditch. You can see in the drawing here on the left, it indicates, I've highlighted it so you can see, the red indicates an excavation which was made by Maghem Broshy. He didn't quite understand what he was digging in because he was digging in a very limited area, and in white shows the ditch that we've excavated. This is an area which John Hutchings is area supervisor of. And look at some of these finds. I mean, quite amazing. You can see sort of some parallels. And here you can see area supervisor John Hutchings sort of in the process of excavating something really exciting, and that is Fatimid jewelry from the 11th century. So from the time of the siege itself, actually, on the floor of a building which was adjacent to the ditch. You can see him carefully extracting it from the ground. what exactly was it? Well, people said it's a bit too heavy. It's beautiful. I mean, it comprises gold and you've got semi-precious stones and pearls. I mean, it really is a museum object. And people said, well, it's an impossibility. If you put that on somebody's ear, the ear would sort of be pulled down. But as you can see from the left, on the far right, and also in the center with the representations there, you can have instances of earrings which are not only attached to the ears, but also to the headdress. I brought here an image from the Metropolitan Museum here on the right as a comparison to the one that we've excavated. And I think you all agree, ladies and gentlemen, are very similar. Indeed, there are Fatimid documents from Cairo, from the Cairo Geniza, which refers to Jews undertaking some very elaborate jewelry making at that time. Whether or not these were made in Cairo, I don't know, but it definitely has an Egyptian sort of source, one assumes anyway, based on the style of this jewelry. Really, it is an amazing piece. And the ditch itself was excavated, and there's quite a lot of evidence which has come out of the siege itself, with arrowheads, and sling stones, and all sorts of things which indicate a very tough battle which took place there at the time. However, there's evidence of additional battles which were taking place in this area later on as well, even after the ditch had been filled in. So presumably the Crusaders decided they didn't need that ditch, and they started sort of filling it in. And here you can see this burnt lair, which may be connected to Baldwin's attempt to wrest power from his mother. His mother was in charge, and basically he said, I want to be a king now, when he arrived at the right age. And his mother said, well, maybe hang on a bit, wait. And he didn't like that, so he then laid siege to this part of Jerusalem. We do have a coin which comes from, two coins actually, which comes from this burnt lair from 1150 to 1153. Okay, so here you can see Queen Melisenda and her son. Finally, we come to the 11th and 13th century fortifications. Here you can see the Fatimid wall, which was reused by the Crusaders, and eventually Saladin builds a fortification wall. That's Saladin, that's Saladin. He builds a wall which surrounds Mount Zion, includes Mount Zion. But at the time of the Ayyubids in the 13th century, a decision is made to exclude Mount Zion from the fortifications, and to allow the city wall to retreat towards the north. And what happens is the Ayyubids then build a series of towers. You can see here, shown here in this light blue, and into the moat. The wall and these towers are inserted into the moat. And the towers themselves, it was originally assumed that they were totally Ayyubid, 13th century. We now think, as a result of our work, that in fact they incorporate towers and perhaps even parts of the city wall that existed already at the time of the Fatimids. So what you're looking at here is a Fatimid tower, which was then reused by the Crusaders, and then not used by Saladin after the conquest of Jerusalem in 1187, but then is reused by the various Ayyubid rulers. On the left, you can see a stone which was found in this wall, which has a fleur-de-lis, but a footed version, which is quite interesting. Now, the lower left-hand corner, you can see some parallels. So this is all very exciting. We also came across an amazing sort of discovery outside the gate. There was apparently an open fish and egg market there. And you can see here Egon Lass, he sorted through a lot of the micro artifacts from the site through a process of flotation, and came across lots and lots of evidence for eggshells, chicken eggshells, and fish bones. and even a fish hook. Now, of course, nobody was catching sort of fish on Mount Sinai, but this was presumably in the marketplace, was used to string up some of the fish that were on sale. So the drawing at the bottom represents a kind of sort of general view of what it looked like, and you can just make out on the right the position of the open. Okay, so we come back, we make full circle, we come back to what we were discussing at the beginning, and that is, again, Boashi said a gate. There was a gate there from the Ayyubid period, and you can see the picture of them again at the top left. We did find a very, very large threshold stone in the excavation. It may or may not be part of that original gate. Avigad in the lower right-hand corner said no gate because he had excavated part of the tower on the north side of the city wall. However, it was the wall, the foundations of the Ottoman wall from the 1540s had been built on top of this enormous mass, a kind of sort of cement mass of stone. The Israel Antiquities Authority at some point decided to shear it away to make it look nicer. And as a result, they came across, and you can see here on the lower left, the picture there, the lower parts of the indentation where that gate was situated. So I think now we can all agree a gate did exist. However, not necessarily only a Ayyubid, as I mentioned before, a Fatimid tower, which may have also served as a gate, and one which was then reused during the Ayyubid period. And this is the gate which was rebuilt in 1212. We've got a dated inscription here. Al-Malik al-Mu'adham Isa, he was the nephew of Saladin. And he's the same person who then destroys this same gateway. He didn't want it to fall into the hands of the Crusaders. I'm not talking about the Crusaders of 1099, but of course, substantially later on, when there were all sorts of negotiations about giving Jerusalem back over to the Crusaders. And so he said, well, if I'm going to be presenting the Crusaders with a city, I'm not going to give them a well-fortified city. So he destroyed the same walls that he had built. And here you can see the destruction. And the inscription itself has been restored in all of its glory. It's one of the longest inscriptions ever found, Muslim inscriptions found in Jerusalem. It's almost 3 meters in length. As you can see from the bottom, it's a translation. This tower was built by the order of Al-Malik al-Mu'adham, etc., etc. There are very sort of honorifics and titles given there as well. Now pride of possession in the Islamic department of the Israel Museum. And this city wall, which was destroyed in 1219 by Al-Malik al-Mu'adham, remains destroyed all the way up to the 1540s when Suleiman the Magnificent decides to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, or rather Sinan, that is the name of the architect engineer who worked for Suleiman the Magnificent. Interesting side fact, neither Suleiman the Magnificent or Sinan, the architect engineer, ever reached Jerusalem. It was all done on paper, apparently. And local engineers carried out the activity of rebuilding the wall. So this is a German map of sort of panoramic sort of map of Jerusalem from 1493. And here you can see it represents kind of sort of a biblical view of Jerusalem, but it shows what exists what existed at that time. And the red star indicates where we are excavating. So we're excavating near some of those fallen towers. And this is a final shot to show Jerusalem in all its glory. Jerusalem is a very special city. It's a city that is very close to my heart. As you can see, the position of our excavation at the bottom, immediately behind it, you've got the Jewish quarter with the Hova synagogue, which has been restored. You see the dome there, that white dome. On the far left, you can see the buildings associated with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and so it's very important for Christianity. And then on the right, you can see the Dome of the Rock, and below it, which is important for Muslims, of course, and below it, the Western Wall, which is a holy place for visiting and local Jewish population as well. So we're really in the heart of things here, and we're exposing the cultures from many different periods, and it's been an exciting enterprise, and I hope that we've made a contribution towards properly understanding Jerusalem. And then finally, to our acknowledgements, one has to sort of thank the team as a whole. I mean, a lot of the success is not down to myself. It's down to the hard working team that we have. That includes my co-directors, the excavation staff, and a lot of people who are working behind the scenes as well, not on excavation, but in the dig headquarters. We've got our dig headquarters situated very close to the old city in Manila, and that's where we're sort of sorting through hundreds of thousands of artifacts, and work still goes on. So I'm very thankful to the organizers of this lecture, especially to Professor Tessa Rajak, and to the chair, who was the chair of the Anglo-Israel, and to Sheila Ford, and to Anthony Rabin for making this possible. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward now to your questions. Over to you, Tessa.
Well, thank you so much, Shimon. That was incredible. And and I'm sure there will be lots of questions. We will move on without more ado. We've lost Anthony, but I think that I can continue to manage the techie side. So people need, just to remind you, to send a chat message to me, ideally with your question in brief on it, or at any rate to say that you want to ask a question, and then I will call on you. We need to unmute, you need to unmute yourselves if you can do that. And if you're not able to ask your question, I will simply read it out. So now I am waiting to receive questions. Is there anybody who would like to kick off? Anybody trying? Here we are. Dudley, yes. Are you there, Dudley? Would you like to ask your question? Well, let me read it out. How is it known that Justinian built the Ner church, and what happened to it?
Good question. We do have literary sources. We have textual sources. Procopius, who writes about the construction of the Ner church, he really wanted it to be even larger than the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and in terms of the area that was covered at the time. Procopius talks about the major landscaping which took place there at that time, including creating these enormous underground reservoirs, and there was an inscription that Abigail excavated within this system complex. It had originally, this is just a matter of interest to me and also to Tessa and to David, who's on at the moment, and that is that Conrad Schick already mapped out these. He described them as a sort of massive columbarium, but still these are these underground reservoirs which have been excavated by Avigad, and the church was built partly on the slope above and on these arches, and it was clearly quite a magnificent sort of building. As to its destruction, the evidence is unclear. Unfortunately, one can sort of theorize, and that has been the case, but only the foundations of the church itself were exposed in Abigad's excavations. clearly it had gone out of use by the Fatimid period, based on the archaeological evidences that we have to hand. But more than that, I can't tell you because we simply don't have the evidence to hand. Does that answer your question, Dudley?
I have a question. It relates to. Sorry, may I?
Oh, sorry, no. You need to send me the chat message.
Oh, a chat.
But is it about this?
It's related.
Well, perhaps I should continue in order. Is that okay? And use so the system doesn't break down.
Sorry,
so just send me a little chat communication. Meanwhile, Roberta Harris, are you there? Roberta, her question is, the slide with Sinan and Suleiman said at the top, destroyed in 2019, please explain. Does Shimon, you got that?
Okay. Destroyed in 2019.
Slide says that, apparently.
No, I think 1219. It's
1219.
Al-Malik al-Mu'adham Isa, he was the Ayyubid sort of sultan based in Damascus, and negotiations were taking place at the time. Hello, anyway, I want to say hello about many years now.
Oh, yeah.
In any case, coming back to your question, yes, he was an Al-Malik al-Mu'adham, actually Adil sort of beforehand decided that because of these sort of negotiations that maybe it would be better not to have strong fortifications up, because once Jerusalem is handed over to the Crusaders, then it will be very difficult if the political circumstances to change to retake the city. So this is scorched earth policy. What happens was that Al-Malik al-Mu'adham destroyed in 1219 the same walls, indeed some of the public buildings in Jerusalem as well, that he had built in previous years. The earliest inscription that I know of relating to the fortifications is from 1203. So this has been, at least it started around 1203 and then continued all the way up to this destruction in 1219.
Okay. I think I may be crackers and can't read anymore because I'm so old, but I think there's a mistake. You just got the dates around the wrong way.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go through that.
2019, right? Okay.
Make sure it may be one of those sort of glitches that sometimes I'm expecting to write 1219. Of course, I put down 2019. Apologies if that's the case.
Thanks, Roberta. Now I have David's question here, but I'm happy to. I invite you, David, to ask it yourself, since you're.
Okay. Sorry, I've just worked out how to send chat messages now. No. Shimon, I was very interested in that Western thoroughfare that you've done a lot of work on, because obviously I'm familiar with the paving stones in the Christian quarter, and I was always curious to know where they led. But what it indicates is there must have been 3 major gates in the southern wall for each of the 3 avenues. So in that case, where was the 3rd gate? I know of the Dung Gate or its equivalent, and I know of the Zion Gate and its equivalent, but I don't know where the 3rd gate was.
Well, the present southern city wall didn't exist in the Byzantine period. It actually ran around Mount Zion. So you have these 3 parallel streets. Let's set aside the eastern one, which ran from Damascus Gate. It began at Damascus Gate, and it runs then down towards the Temple Mount, the western side of the Temple Mount.
That's right.
Then you have the central one, which is the major Cardo Maximus. It runs all the way to the area where we're digging, but no fortification existed in the area we're digging. We were in the heart of the city, the Byzantine period. there was apparently some sort of gate, but a gate for the cardo, not for not part of any fortification, as represented on Madaba map. From there, our street, which we've exposed, which is only a quarter in the width of the Cardo Maximus, then extends all the way round Mount Zion, goes round and then towards the southwest, where it goes to the Byzantine gate that was unearthed by Bliss and Dickey in the 1890s. In 1895, they found a gate there. This is the gate that has now been, since Gil Pixner attribution, has been called the Essene Gate.
Oh, yes.
Referring it to the one which is mentioned by Flavius. However, my work on looking at Bliss and Dickey's sort of archival stuff shows very clearly that there was no gate there from the second temple period, from the 1st century. It is all Byzantine, but you have different stages there. Indeed, the recent excavations, you know, it's being re-excavated by Dieter Viehvöger and the German Protestant school. And they, in the recent excavations I visited, this was 2 years ago, they don't have anything there substantial. They have part of the fortifications from the early Roman period, but there's no sign of any gate. They assume that there was one, but there's no evidence of one. I think it's wishful thinking. I think what you have there is the Byzantine gate, and that's clear from Bliss and Dickey's work all the way back in the 19th century. So there is that one gate. Now you have Muqaddasi and all sorts of sources which refer to names of gates.
Yes.
And then this becomes a sort of game of sort of how you link up certain gates, you know, with those mentioned as sources, Yoram Safir and many others have tried that out. And Sion Gate can also move. You can have the same name, but in different places. So this is also sort of problematic. So that's an answer to your question.
Thank you. No, that's fine. I appreciate that the gates would have been further south, but anyway, you've covered it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. And now Ruth Campbell, who I can actually see on the left of my particular screen. Would you like to?
Yes.
Hello, Ruth.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Very well.
Hello, Shimon. Lovely to hear you again. I just noted that when I was on the digs in 2015 through 17, there was talk of opening the site to the general public. Remember the area that Rebecca was working on and putting a road across for them to go through. And I was wondering what the plans are for 2021 or beyond for that. Is that really in the far distance?
Well, it's very difficult because of the situation with coronavirus.
Obviously, yeah.
So, I mean, this season, it's very disappointing to me that we had to cancel. I decided to cancel it quite early on, actually. And I'm very glad that I did so. I think it was in February or something like that I decided that's it. One has to sort of cancel. And as things transpired, things got worse. And over here in North Carolina, for instance, it hasn't even plateaued yet. So we're still in a difficult sort of situation. So the only possibility is for the renewal of excavations in 2021, and that is that's on the books. I mean, we're working towards that, and I'm hoping that it will take place. But you know, it's very difficult to know. These are uncertain times, and one has to be careful. There's a responsibility that is incumbent upon all of us to, you know, to look after each other, and this is not an easy time. So, you know, if we do resume excavations, I was just recently sort of interviewed for some world radio sort of program. They were asking about how coronavirus impacts upon archaeologists. I mean, it's different as opposed to other things that it influences and changes. But there's no doubt about it that we'll have to rethink how we carry out excavations. One, in terms of what we want to achieve, and I mentioned that earlier on in the lecture, we do want to excavate the Iron Age levels. We got down to those tantalizing remains from Nebuchadnezzar's destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BC, and it's there, it's waiting for us to excavate, and it's so rich. I mean, we just touched that layer, and then all of these arrowheads and elements of destruction, and that beautiful piece of jewelry from the Iron Age, which is very rare, came tumbling out. And so we've got to excavate that, and so that will be our target.
I'd been there and missed that one.
Yeah, so that'll be 2021. We're going to be working on that.
Thank you.
May I ask a question? Fitting myself into a little bit of a gap. I'm wondering about the sort of adjacent excavations. Can you give us, Shimon, a little bit of a picture of what else is going on in the Mount Zion area that touches on your site, and are they on your site, and are they interlinked to any extent?
Good question. There are small excavations which are being undertaken by the Israel Antiquities Authority. They usually conduct excavations in response to changes which are being made. Street levels are being changed, sewage systems are being put in, and things like that. So, for instance, in the southern part of the Armenian Garden, a whole series of trial pits were put in because the Armenian community wanted to reinvent or re-landscape their car park there. So trial pits were put in, but they didn't really touch upon anything substantial from the ancient period. Recently, I was informed that additional pits were excavated along the Armenian main street, revealing a few remains. The Germans have been excavating just to the south of the tomb of David, in the area of the so-called Essene Gate, as I mentioned, but also in the Greek property there, uncovering the remains of structures, houses, or perhaps public buildings on either side of an alleyway. That's been quite interesting. And then you have Yechiel Zellinger, who's been excavating on behalf of the Israel Antiquities Authority parts of Bliss and Dickey's walls that they found, the fortification walls, which were uncovered between 1895 and 1898 for the PF in London. And he's been exposing parts of that. One interesting fact is that Archibald Dickey, who was the architect who was working with Frederick Bliss on these excavations back in the 19th century, his work was so exact that when Yechiel Zellinger wanted to remap the same remains that have been uncovered by Bliss and Dickey, that his modern surveyor came along and said, there's no point in making any new sort of measurements here, because it's so exact. The drawings of the ashlar stones and everything are so perfect. The drawings which were made back in the 19th century. There's a few corrections here and there, which is quite amazing. Other explorers of the 19th century were not as exact. Robert McAllister, for instance, sometimes he was off by 30 meters. That's quite a lot, when you can be off by 5 centimeters, maybe 10 centimeters, but 30 meters is quite substantial. That is at Gezer. And he was, of course, McAllister was a successor of Bliss in the field, working out there in the 19th century. So in terms of the archaeology of Mount Zion, there's always ongoing sort of works there. Now there's some plan to put this cable car up there. They're going to sort of start building it up there. How this will work out, I have no idea. It will mean, of course, excavations, which will be conducted in different parts there. I'm always in touch because I'm interested in finding out what's going on with excavators in the field. And of course, I go visit as much as I can when I'm over there. I haven't recently, for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answers your question. I mean, it's a long, long answer to it.
No, that's really very interesting. And of course, the supplementary question immediately leaps to mind. Well, would this cable car be good or bad for archaeology and for the whole environment there?
Well, there's always that sort of balance there, that you have archaeologists, of course, would like to see everything preserved, and you can't turn the whole city of Jerusalem into a museum. I mean, it is a living and breathing city, and So
Yeah.
it's problematic. Of course, there's the political aspects of it, which I don't want to go into, which is problematic as well. The status of Jerusalem being unresolved. And of course, then there's also the aspects relating to land ownership and those sort of aspects. As I mentioned right at the beginning, we're very lucky that we're working in an area which does not, we don't step on anybody's toes. It is common land, and it's been, during the British Mandate period, it was designated as common land. The reason for that was because there was some forward looking, and Ashby, who was the civil engineer of Jerusalem, sort of said, look, if we don't buy up this land along the city wall, you'll get a situation like in other ancient cities, like Damascus, for instance, well, what remains of it today, but where you have buildings encroaching the city wall. So they're built all the way up to the city wall. So you can't see them from a distance. So as part of that, Ashby decided to make that decision. And so we're working in that sort of common land. And as a result, our perspective is somewhat sort of different. We're not undertaking salvage excavations, emergency operations such as the Israel Antiquities Authority.
Great, thanks. And a question from Jeffrey Cohen about a different period. Are you there, Jeffrey? Well, the question is, was anything found dating from Nehemiah/early Second Temple period?
Okay, well, Nehemiah would be, we would sort of refer to Nehemiah as the Persian period. So, and the early Iron Age, so the two things. Let me first deal with the early Iron Age. There is no evidence of early Iron Age in our excavations. The earliest artifacts, actually, that we do find dates from the Chalcolithic period, including sort of polished axes and sort of flint implements of one sort or another. So there's definitely some use of this area from very, very early times, and presumably in the early Iron Age as well. And now sometimes you find a few bits of pottery, scattered pottery and things like that, which give us that sort of indication. But clearly there's no settlement on the Western Hill there where we're digging until the time of King Hezekiah, with extension of the city, the construction of the broad wall around the suburbs, which have extended from the city of David towards the west and towards the northwest as well. So that's in terms of the early Iron Age. So the earliest stuff that we have dates from the 8th century BC. There are some places in Roche's excavations, we still haven't fully gone through those materials. So maybe there's some 9th century material. A lot of the new work down in the city of David will help us identify some of those elements. In terms of the Persian period, which is after the destruction of the city in 586 and all the way down to 140 BC, when Jonathan and Simon rebuild the first wall of Jerusalem, then we have very few finds, but they do exist. We have coins, and David is working on the coins. We do have coins which date from the Hellenistic period. So that's later. We even have a Persian coin, a silver coin, very small, which comes from Roche's excavations on the summit, which is one of the earliest of the coins that we know of. So there's something going on there. It's unclear what it is. It seems to me, and this is something which has been debated, that the Persian period, that they might have practiced what I would call settlement or domestic settlement distancing, using the social distancing sort of, meaning that they were scattered around the hills round about the area of the temple, perhaps with a more congregated kind of sort of settlement to the south of the Temple Mount, in the area of the city of David of today, which would explain why we get this fragments of pottery and that Yahud silver coin I mentioned and other things. I hope I've answered your question.
Right. Well, time is moving on. We perhaps have time for a very, very quick last question, which it might be better if I asked on behalf of David Shamash. It's a big one. Does your archaeology work confirm that the Bible is true with a long Jewish presence in the area?
You've got to say that again. I didn't catch the last part.
Does your archaeology confirm that the Bible is true?
Okay. This is a difficult question, but I'll answer it in three parts. First of all, this is a scientific expedition which is reaching out to expose the archaeological history of that part of Jerusalem, and that's the first thing. So we're not looking for something specific. It's not like we're driven to find things that might confirm any kind of ancient text, actually. I mean, we're dealing with archaeological remains, and then we're going to the difference of the sources. The second part of that is that the biblical sources, the Bible itself, which was put together for theological reasons, has an enormous amount of historical kernels in it. So one has to sort of extract those and then to compare and contrast with archaeological remains. So, for instance, you could sort of say that we found proof of a biblical text because we're digging, we find the destruction of 586, and there's substantial burning there, and there's no doubt about it that there was a destruction which took place at a time which was so savage and perhaps so quick that this beautiful piece of jewelry was abandoned, because usually if there's sort of time for people to collect their belongings and collect the things that are valuables together when they're sort of running away or escaping, but clearly from the point of view of the destruction that we have from other parts of the city as well, and from the City of David excavations, evidence is there. This was a major event. So here you have proof, if you want to put it that way, of the biblical sort of text. The third part is that biblical archaeology has changed, and it metamorphosized in the 1990s, or actually at the end of the 1980s, into what Professor Deaver described as Deaver described as Syrio-Palestinian archaeology. He said one should sort of separate biblical history has to be done by biblical historians, and archaeologists have to deal with Syrio-Palestinian archaeology. I always like to have a sort of bit of a laugh with him from time to time, but he's moved very much back into biblical archaeology since then, in terms of his books and publications and everything. But I think a change has come back, and we are now sort of saying there's no point in digging and being antagonistic towards the biblical text, and that we shouldn't simply leave it to biblical historians. We should be all working together on trying to understand the past, and the biblical account is such an important one. And so what we need to do is to go back and utilize this resource and see what we find and compare with archaeological remains. I mean, I even wrote a book which is called The Final Days of Jesus, which is not actually about Jesus. It's about what did Jerusalem look like at the time that Jesus went to Jerusalem. You know, and most people who deal with that subject matter, they only go to the Gospels. They will go to alternative texts which exist from that period, and then they will contextualize it all together. And what I was sort of saying, and that was the point of the book, was that, hey, there's another resource which you're forgetting, and that's archaeology. And archaeology should be looked at some detail. And it has changed our understanding of biblical events, if you're going to include the New Testament in that as well.
Well, thank you, Shimon. I think that was a splendid, broad perspective on which to end, and I hope a helpful answer to you, David Shamash, as well. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording, if I can, and then thank you formally. well, stop recording.
Yeah, may I say thank you to